It started on a Sunday evening, the kind where the air still holds a little warmth from the afternoon sun. I was standing in my aunt's dining room, smoothing the sleeve of a plain navy sweater, when my cousin said it. "You're still renting that tiny place downtown, right?" he asked, smiling over the rim of his wine glass. "Some people just don't aim very high." A few people laughed, not loudly, just enough. I remember the sound of the chandelier humming faintly above us, the smell of rosemary and butter from the roast chicken, the heavy weight of the silverware in my hand. I nodded once and took a sip of water. I didn't correct him. What they didn't know was that earlier that week, a courier had delivered a thick envelope to my office. Inside, it was a signed contract with my name on the final page and a majority ownership percentage that would change everything they thought they understood about me. But that part comes later. That night, I was just Ethan, the quiet one. My family gathers once a month at my Aunt Patricia's house in Bellevue. It's a wide, modern place with tall windows and polished floors that echo when you walk across them. There's always music playing softly from hidden speakers. And there's always a subtle competition in the air. They don't argue, they compare. My cousin Lila works in luxury retail branding. She talks with her hands, bracelets chiming softly as she lists new clients and expansion plans. My older cousin Mark invests in tech startups. He likes to mention the cities he flies through more than the deals themselves. I usually listen. I drive a 7-year-old gray Honda. I wear simple clothes. I live in a brick apartment building in Tacoma, about 40 minutes away. I've never brought anyone from the family there. They've filled in the blanks on their own. That night, Lila leaned back in her chair and studied me like I was a small puzzle. "You're 37 now, right?" she asked. 36, I said. She smiled. "Still time." "For what?" I asked gently. "For something bigger." She didn't say it unkindly, just casually, like she was offering advice. Mark swirled his drink. "Real estate's crazy right now. If you don't own something already, it's going to be hard to catch up." I folded my napkin carefully beside my plate. "It is busy," I agreed. They took that as confirmation. The truth was, I had been in real estate for over a decade. I just never discussed it at family dinners. When I was 25, I worked leasing low-income units in South Tacoma. I handled maintenance calls. I sat with tenants who were behind on rent and tried to structure payment plans that wouldn't push them out. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't make for good dinner conversation. But I learned. I learned how zoning codes quietly shape neighborhoods. I learned how refinancing works when you're patient. I learned how small properties, held long enough, become leverage. Over time, I formed a company. Nothing flashy, a clean name, Harbor Crest Holdings. I didn't attach my last name to it. The first building I bought was a 6-unit property near an old rail line. The floors creaked. The wiring was outdated. The tenants had been there for years and expected another rent hike when ownership changed. Instead, we fixed the roof. We replaced the plumbing in stages. We kept rent stable. From there, it grew slowly. Another 8 units. Then a 12-unit mixed-use building with a bakery on the corner. I reinvested everything. No headlines, no social media posts, just paperwork, meetings, quiet signatures. Back in the dining room, dessert arrived. Lemon tart, powdered sugar dusted neatly across white plates. My Aunt Patricia finally turned to me. "So, Ethan," she said, setting down her fork, "what exactly are you doing these days? Still managing properties for someone?" There it was again. Managing for someone. "Yes," I said calmly. "Something like that." Mark chuckled. "Well, when you're ready to buy something of your own, let me know. I might know a guy." I smiled at him. "I appreciate that." And I meant it. I've never believed in correcting people in the moment. Silence gives you information. It tells you what they assume. It shows you how they measure worth. That evening, I gathered enough information. Because 2 weeks earlier, a high-rise in downtown Seattle had quietly gone up for sale. River Point Tower. It had been in our family for 40 years. My grandfather built it. Over time, ownership had been divided into shares among siblings and cousins. Lately, mismanagement had crept in, deferred maintenance, inflated vendor contracts, missing funds that were labeled as consulting adjustments. The board wanted to sell, quickly, quietly. They thought an outside firm was negotiating. They were right. They just didn't know that Harborcrest Holdings was that firm, and that I had already secured 72% of the voting shares through a structured buyout agreement finalized 3 days before that dinner. I watched Lila reach for another slice of tart. I watched Mark check his phone. I let them talk. Then I drove home in my gray Honda, parked in my usual spot under the maple tree outside my apartment, and carried my leftovers upstairs. Inside, the hallway smelled faintly of detergent and someone's late-night cooking. My neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, had left a small potted plant outside my door again. She does that sometimes. I unlocked my door. On the kitchen counter sat a copy of the River Point acquisition contract, clipped neatly and ready for Monday's board filing. I set my keys down. Then I waited. Monday mornings in my office are quiet. Harborcrest Holdings occupies the 3rd floor of a renovated warehouse near the water in Tacoma. Exposed brick. Large windows. Polished concrete floors that hold the morning chill a little longer than you expect. We keep the space simple. No oversized logos. No decorative statements about vision or disruption. Just desks, files, schedules. When I walked in that morning, the lights were already on in the conference room. Maya, my operations director, was seated at the long table with a stack of binders aligned neatly in front of her. "They confirmed the vote window," she said without looking up. "Wednesday at 10. I nodded and set my briefcase down. "Any objections filed?" "None that hold weight," she replied. "Legal reviewed everything again. It's clean." Clean. That word matters more than people realize. I've always believed that if you move carefully enough, you don't need to raise your voice. Documents speak clearly on their own. River Point Tower had once been the pride of our family. 30 stories, steel and glass, a landmark on the skyline. My grandfather's name still etched into the original cornerstone in the lobby. Over the years, though, the building had become something else. I started noticing small irregularities 5 years ago when I requested financial summaries out of curiosity. Maintenance costs fluctuated without explanation. Vendor contracts renewed without competitive bids. A landscaping company owned by a distant relative received steady payments even during months when no visible work was done. I didn't confront anyone then. Instead, I began collecting information. Not aggressively, just steadily. Public filings, board minutes, service agreements, payment logs. I built a timeline. Step 1, understand the structure. Step 2, identify the pressure points. Step 3, wait until the window opens. The window opened when 3 minority shareholders decided they wanted out. They were older, tired of the internal disagreements, concerned about declining occupancy rates. They contacted an intermediary broker in Denver. The broker contacted us. I never used my last name in the negotiation process. Through Harborcrest, we presented a structured buyout plan. Fair valuation, quick close, no publicity. Within 8 weeks, we secured enough shares to request a formal vote of control. No one at Sunday dinner knew any of this. On Wednesday morning, I drove to downtown Seattle early. The sky was pale gray, and the air smelled faintly like rain and traffic. River Point Tower's lobby still carried that polished stone scent I remembered from childhood visits. Cool marble underfoot, soft echo when the elevator doors opened. Board meetings were usually held in a smaller conference room on the 15th floor. That day, the room felt tighter than usual. Mark was there already, leaning back in his chair, scrolling through emails. Lila sat beside him, whispering something I couldn't hear. My Aunt Patricia stood near the window, arms crossed loosely. They glanced at me with mild surprise. "Oh," Lila said, "you're here." "I received the notice," I replied. Mark gave a short laugh. "Observing the family business now?" "Something like that," I said. The attorney representing the shareholders cleared his throat and began outlining the agenda: formal language, voting procedure, transfer documentation. I listened carefully, hands folded on the table. When it came time to announce the proxy holders, the attorney read through a list of entities. And representing Harbor Crest Holdings, majority stakeholder with 72% voting interest. There was a pause. Mr. Ethan Clark. The room shifted. It wasn't dramatic. No one stood up, no one shouted. But chairs stopped moving. Mark blinked once. "I'm sorry," he said. "What?" The attorney repeated it, slower this time. I unfolded the document in front of me and slid a copy across the table toward Patricia. "The acquisition closed Friday," I said. "All filings are complete." Silence has weight. You can feel it in your shoulders. Lila's bracelets didn't make a sound now. "That's not possible," Mark said quietly. "We would have known." "You were notified," I replied. "Through your registered email address, 2 weeks ago." He looked down at his phone. Patricia finally spoke. "You're saying you own River Point?" "I own a controlling interest," I said, "through Harbor Crest." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't smile. I simply opened the binder Maya had prepared and turned it so they could see the first page. Acquisition summary, share percentages, closing dates, wire confirmations. Facts are steady things. They don't argue. No one spoke for several seconds. Then the attorney continued with the agenda, as if this were a routine procedural matter, because legally, it was. We proceeded through the vote. The new board structure was confirmed. Independent management oversight would be installed within 30 days. A forensic audit would begin immediately. I took notes. Mark stared at the table. Lila looked at me differently now. Not impressed, not angry, just recalculating. After the meeting ended, Patricia approached me near the elevators. "Why didn't you tell us?" she asked. I considered that for a moment. "You never asked," I said gently. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. I stepped inside. As they closed, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the mirrored panel. Same navy sweater, same calm expression. Nothing about me looked different. But upstairs, in the secured records room, a new access code had already been activated under my name, and the audit team was scheduled to arrive at 8 the next morning. I checked my watch. Then I waited. The audit team arrived at 8:02 a.m. 3 people, rolling cases, neutral expressions. They introduced themselves, showed credentials, and asked for a quiet workspace with secure Wi-Fi access. I walked them to the former executive conference room on the 20th floor. The blinds were half open, letting in thin strips of morning light. Dust drifted in the beams when someone moved. "We'll need full ledger access going back 7 years," the lead auditor said calmly. "Vendor contracts, maintenance logs, board approvals, internal communications, where applicable." "You'll have it," I replied. By 9:30, the first document requests were already flagged. It's interesting how quickly confidence shifts when procedures begin. Mark stopped by around 10. He didn't knock. He stood in the doorway, watching the auditors spread files across the long table. "This seems excessive," he said, attempting a casual tone. "It's standard," I answered. "For what?" "For a building with declining occupancy and inconsistent reporting." He crossed his arms. "We've handled it internally for decades." "Yes," I said. "You have." I didn't add anything else. The first discrepancy surfaced before noon. A roofing repair allocation from 18 months earlier. Budget approved for $480,000. Work partially completed. Final invoice paid in full. But the contractor's time-stamped progress photos didn't match the payment schedule. The auditors flagged it. Quietly. Then landscaping invoices. Repeated monthly charges during winter months when no service occurred. Vendor registered under an LLC formed by one of Patricia's close associates. None of this required commentary from me. Paperwork is patient. By Wednesday afternoon, The auditors had created a working spreadsheet that filled an entire screen with highlighted cells. Yellow for inconsistencies, red for probable misallocation. I reviewed it alone in my office as the building grew quieter outside. Step 1. Confirm findings through independent verification. Step 2. Freeze discretionary spending authority. Step 3. Schedule controlled disclosure with legal present. I didn't rush. That evening, I drove back to Tacoma. The sky was streaked with orange, fading into gray. Traffic moved steadily, but without urgency. At home, I watered the small plants on my balcony. Mrs. Alvarez was below, talking to her grandson. Someone was cooking garlic nearby. Normal sounds. My phone buzzed once, a message from Lila. We need to talk. I set the phone face down. Then I made tea. The controlled disclosure meeting was scheduled for Friday at 11 a.m. in the main boardroom. Legal counsel present. Audit summary prepared. No press. No raised voices. When Friday came, the atmosphere in the room felt different from the vote earlier that week. Tighter. Focused. The auditors presented first. No adjectives. Just charts. Transaction dates. Cross-referenced vendor records. Bank confirmations. Total irregular allocations identified in preliminary review, $2.1 million. Mark leaned forward, jaw tight. Are you accusing us of theft? The lead auditor kept his tone even. We are identifying financial inconsistencies requiring explanation. Patricia looked at me then. You orchestrated this, she said quietly. I authorized an audit as majority stakeholder, I replied. That is within my rights. Lila's hands were still now, no bracelet sounds. There are reasonable explanations, Mark insisted. Timing differences, administrative errors. Those can be submitted in writing, I said, with supporting documentation. Silence again. I slid a single-page document across the table. Effective immediately. All vendor contracts subject to rebid. Temporary suspension of related party transactions. Installation of third-party property management oversight. 30-day internal review window before external reporting requirements triggered. This isn't personal, I added. It's structural. Mark let out a slow breath. You could destroy the family name with this. The name is attached to the building, I said. The building has to be stable. No one argued with that. After the meeting, Patricia remained seated while the others filed out. You planned this for years, she said. I prepared, I answered. She studied me as if trying to reconcile the version of me from Sunday dinner with the one sitting across from her now. You let us believe you were smaller, she said. I didn't correct you. There's a difference. She nodded once, slowly. Outside the boardroom, I could hear the low hum of the building's HVAC system. Steady, unemotional. Later that afternoon, I received a confirmation email from the independent management firm agreeing to assume operational control pending transition. I read it carefully. Then I closed my laptop. Because the first power shift isn't loud, it's procedural, and the next phase would require something even more precise. I checked the time. Then I waited. The following Monday, I arrived at River Point before sunrise. The lobby lights were still dimmed to their overnight setting. The security guard at the front desk nodded politely. He had worked there for 12 years. We had spoken a few times in passing, but never at length. That morning, I introduced myself properly. I'll be around more often, I told him. He smiled. Good. This place could use steady. Steady. That was the word I kept coming back to. Upstairs, the independent management firm had already begun their transition review. New access credentials were issued, vendor payment approvals rerouted, accounting permissions updated. It wasn't dramatic. It was administrative. I gathered the existing contracts into 3 folders. Folder 1, Essential Operations. Folder 2, Renegotiation Candidates. Folder 3, Suspended Pending Review. Step 1, Stabilize cash flow. Step 2, protect tenants. Step 3, address internal accountability. I wrote those steps on a legal pad and kept it beside me. By midweek, tenants began receiving notices about scheduled maintenance improvements that had been postponed for years. Elevator servicing, fire alarm inspections, plumbing upgrades in older units. We also set up an open office hour in the lobby conference room. Residents could walk in and speak directly with management. The first afternoon, only 4 people came. An elderly man with a folder of handwritten notes about heating inconsistencies. A young couple concerned about parking lot lighting. A woman who had lived in the building since the late 1990s. She mostly wanted reassurance that rent wouldn't suddenly spike. "We're reviewing long-term stabilization plans," I told her. "No immediate increases." She exhaled slowly. "Thank you for saying that directly." That evening, I received a formal response from Mark's attorney. The language was careful, defensive, requesting time to clarify accounting anomalies. I forwarded it to our legal counsel with a simple note. Proceed by timeline. No commentary, no emotion. 2 days later, Lila asked to meet privately. We sat in a quiet cafe near the waterfront, afternoon light reflecting off the water, the smell of espresso in the air. She looked tired. "I didn't realize how much was loose," she said carefully. I wasn't looking closely. "I know," I replied. She traced the rim of her cup. "Are you going to report it?" "If required by law, yes." She nodded. "And if we cooperate?" "There's a path for internal resolution before mandatory disclosure thresholds are met," I said. "But it depends on transparency." She studied me for a moment. "You always were patient," she said. "I was observant," I answered gently. Back at the building, the audit team finalized their preliminary findings. The total irregular exposure had adjusted slightly downward after documentation clarified 2 entries. That mattered to me. Accuracy matters more than impact. Friday morning, I drafted a formal corrective framework to present to the board. Full financial reconciliation within 30 days. Repayment agreements where misallocations were confirmed. Public statement limited to operational restructuring unless legal thresholds required expansion. Resignation from vendor relationships tied to related parties. No accusations, just conditions. At 10 a.m., we convened again in the boardroom. This time, there was less posture. Mark's shoulders seemed lower. Patricia had a folder in front of her that she opened immediately instead of waiting. I walked through the framework calmly, page by page. "This preserves the building's stability," I said. "It protects tenants. It protects the long-term viability of the asset." "And us?" Mark asked quietly. "It gives you the opportunity to correct course." Silence settled again, but it felt different now. Not sharp, measured. They asked logistical questions, timelines, legal implications, payment schedules. No one raised their voice. By the end of the meeting, all parties agreed to proceed under the corrective framework. It wasn't a victory. It was alignment under pressure. When I stepped out into the hallway afterward, my phone vibrated. A notification from a local business journal. Riverpoint Tower under new majority leadership following quiet-share acquisition. No speculation, just fact. I read it once. Then I put the phone back in my pocket. The strategic escalation wasn't about exposure. It was about order. And now that order was in place, one final conversation remained. I scheduled it for the following Tuesday. Then I waited. Tuesday afternoon was clear and unusually warm for early spring. I asked that the final meeting be held in the original executive suite on the top floor of Riverpoint. The room hadn't been used much in recent years. The carpet was still thick. The long walnut table carried faint scratches from decades of meetings. I arrived early. I placed 3 folders on the table, evenly spaced. One labeled Financial Reconciliation Agreement. One labeled Governance Transition Plan. One labeled Personal Repayment Schedule, water glasses, notepads, nothing else. When Patricia, Mark, and Lila entered, they didn't speak at first. They took their seats without ceremony. Through the window, the city moved quietly below us, traffic lights shifting, ferries crossing the water in the distance. I began without introduction. "The audit is complete," I said. "External counsel has confirmed the findings. The total confirmed misallocated funds are $184 million after adjustments." Mark looked down at the table. Lila kept her hands folded. Patricia met my eyes. "You've structured it already," she said. "Yes." I slid the first folder toward them. The reconciliation agreement outlines repayment terms over 36 months. Interest waived if payments remain current. Any default triggers mandatory reporting obligations. No emotion, just structure. Mark cleared his throat. "And if we refuse?" "Then the findings are forwarded to the appropriate regulatory bodies within 7 business days," I replied. I let the words settle, not as a threat, as a timeline. Patricia opened the second folder. "Governance transition?" she asked. "Effective immediately. Vendor relationships tied to related parties end. Independent procurement review begins. Quarterly financial transparency summaries published to all shareholders." She nodded slowly. Lila finally spoke. "You could have humiliated us publicly." "That wasn't the objective," I said. Mark looked at me then, something softer behind the frustration. "You let us talk to you like you didn't understand any of this," he said. "I understood," I replied. "I was listening. There's a difference between silence and absence. I had never been absent." Patricia rested her palms flat on the table. "You're not angry," she observed. I considered that carefully. "No," I said. "I'm responsible." The room grew very still. After a moment, I added, "This building carries our grandfather's name. It houses hundreds of people. Accountability is part of stewardship." No one argued. One by one, they opened the final folder. The repayment schedule was clear. Specific amounts, due dates, escrow instructions. Mark read every line. Lila closed her eyes briefly before signing. Patricia signed last. The sound of pen against paper was steady. When they finished, I gathered the documents and placed them back into my briefcase. "This doesn't erase what happened," I said calmly, "but it resets what happens next." Mark stood first. "I misjudged you," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "I never asked you to measure me," I replied gently. Patricia paused near the door. "You'll be at dinner this Sunday?" she asked. "Yes," I said. She gave a small nod. "Good." After they left, I remained seated for a few minutes. The city outside continued as it always had, unaware of internal corrections, unaffected by personal dynamics. I checked my phone. An email from the management firm confirming implementation of the new oversight structure. Another from legal confirming executed agreements. Order. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, then stood and turned off the lights in the executive suite. The confrontation hadn't required raised voices. It required clarity. And now that clarity was documented, the final stage would unfold on its own. I stepped into the elevator. Then I waited. Sunday mornings are slower now. I wake up without an alarm. I make coffee the same way I've made it for years. 2 scoops, boiling water. Let it sit a minute before pressing. The apartment is quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the occasional footsteps in the hallway. After breakfast, I usually tidy the desk near the window, stack the mail, wipe the surface, water the plant Mrs. Alvarez gave me last winter. It's grown taller than I expected. River Point runs smoothly these days. The quarterly reports arrive on time. The repayment schedule continues without issue. Independent oversight is no longer a disruption. It's simply part of the system now. At family dinners, no one measures worth out loud anymore. We talk about ordinary things, recipes, travel delays, books someone started but hasn't finished. The building comes up occasionally, but only in practical terms. Maintenance updates, community events in the lobby, A holiday drive organized by tenants. A few months ago, Mark asked if I would review a proposal he was considering for a mixed-income development project. He brought spreadsheets. He asked questions instead of making declarations. I walked him through financing structures, risk buffers, long-term operating projections. He took notes. There was no audience, no competition, just work. Lila stopped by River Point one afternoon unannounced. Not to argue, not to defend anything. She wanted to see the changes in person. We stood in the renovated lobby while tenants moved in and out. The lighting was warmer now. The front desk area felt less imposing. "It feels lighter," she said. "It's organized," I replied. She nodded slowly. Before leaving, she said, "I'm reworking how I handle client billing, transparency clauses, third-party review." "That's wise," I said. "No lecture needed. Sometimes correction doesn't require confrontation. It requires example." On my kitchen counter at home, I keep a simple folder labeled Harbor Crest. Inside are current projects, small acquisitions, renovation schedules, nothing flashy, just steady expansion. Last week, I received a call from a property owner in a neighboring city. Family-owned building, internal disputes, deferred maintenance, quiet tension. He sounded tired. "I was told you handle transitions carefully," he said. "I handle them clearly," I answered. We scheduled a meeting. Not every situation ends cleanly. Not every family adjusts. But when systems replace assumptions, things have a way of stabilizing. That's what I've learned. Late at night, I sometimes step onto the balcony and look toward the faint outline of the city in the distance. River Point's lights are visible if the sky is clear. I don't feel the need to prove anything anymore. I never corrected them when they called me small, or behind, or cautious. I just built. And when the time came, the documents spoke for me. If you've ever been underestimated because you were quiet, or steady, or not interested in competing out loud, I hope you remember this. Silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's preparation. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps more than you think, and I'd love to know where you're watching from. Tell me your city and what time it is there right now. I always read the comments. 2 of our most popular stories will be on your screen next. They're about similar moments when calm decisions changed everything. Thank you for spending this time with me.